Always use our gifts of understanding, courage, common sense, wisdom and integrity in all our discussions, dealings and decisions so that we may solve problems effectively. May we always recognise each other's values and opinions, be fair-minded and ready to listen to each other's point of view. In our dealings with each other, let us always be open to the truth of others and ready to seek agreement, slow to take offence and always prepared to forgive. May we always work to enhance the well-being of the Selwyn District and its communities.
Very well. Thanks, Councillor McInnes. There are no apologies for the meeting today. We're fully present. I'm not aware of any extraordinary business that's not currently in an extraordinary meeting. And conflicts of interest other than those that are on the register. There are none. Confirmation of minutes from the Wednesday the 9th of December meeting. A mover and seconder for those. Councillor Lyle. Second, Councillor Mugford. Is there any discussion on those minutes? All those in favour say aye. Against? Declare it carried. And we come to the report on page 7, report number 1, 7 through 36, Group Manager, Community Services and Facilities. And us. Oh, you did. It is available to you. Jen, if you'd like to do it now. Jen, you're familiar with public forum, so 10 minutes for you to be able to share. Thank you for letting us know. Sorry, I hadn't written that on my agenda in front of me. You're welcome to address the meeting, and there'll be a chance for questions and answers as well. The right-hand side button will turn it on. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor and councillors, might I say that I'm pretty disappointed in the content of this special meeting this morning, and especially the way that it's been announced to the community. The stealth in which I believe bureaucracy is attempting to take over democracy. Some people were lucky in the community to receive a copy of this agenda last Friday. The rest of us didn't get it till Monday. Even more surprising was yesterday that I believe the matter of this report starting on page 7 was probably already approved, because from the Selwyn District Council I received a notification that the Rollson Reserve Management Committee booking for the community centre meetings is now cancelled. I think that's disgusting. Somebody thought this meeting was going to be a fait accompli and cancelled the bookings for the Rollson Reserve Management meetings to be held in the community centre. Public couldn't even get into this building till 8:30. And I really wonder, Council, if you understand what could be forced upon the community here today. At the end of the discussions that will follow, I invite you to send the report back for rewriting. It's very, very light on things that matter to the community, such as how are these facilities going to be managed by staff without the management committees. We see in parts of the suspected reasons for wanting to dump 70 community committees, the Health and Safety and Employment Act as being an impediment to volunteers. But at the end of the report, we also note that the writer of the report expects some of the sports groups to continue maintaining their grounds. Will they not be volunteers at that point? Will they not still be covered by Health and Safety and Employment Act? Page 15 identifies that staff spend 80 hours a week dealing with committees. That's 2 persons full time. The report doesn't identify how many further staff full time will be required to fill the positions that are undertaken now by the volunteers. No mention of that, no mention of its financing ramifications or anything else. That needs to be identified before this report's considered. There's no mention of the future for the 11 paid reserve caretaker roles. What are they going to be doing out there, sitting out in their tractors and mowers and that now, not knowing the result of this report and what their future position will be? Should have been identified before it went into the report. Page 20, I note the report writer identifies pavilions. And again at page 23, the report writer doesn't obviously know that the pavilions are generally owned by the clubs on leased reserve land from the council. Doesn't come under this issue at all. Council will consider entering into formal agreements to use with specific sports clubs. They already own their own buildings. You drive more double-decker buses through this report than single buses, that's for sure. I note here on the states on this basis, the matter is considered to be of low significance and no additional engagement with the community is required as part of this proposal. As far as I'm aware, there's been no consultation up until 2 months ago. For many years, I've been the chairman of the Reserve Management Committee in this town. I don't recall any consultation on dumping the committees, certainly not with us. And I keep a pretty close eye on the local government and politics of this district, even from afar. Also of concern is the report that's obviously sitting somewhere in draft, which I believe is on the charging for reserves. And I note on page 12, there was a revenue and financing policy in 2018, which requires that council reserves, halls, community centres achieve user charges at a medium-low level of 20 to 39% in relation to their operating costs. I'm quite concerned, especially in these large growing towns of Eastern Selwyn especially, of charges coming in for reserves especially. I know halls and that came in and there's discussion through here about some of them are not wanting to pay. They shouldn't pay, especially in reserves, and expecting sports clubs to raise money to pay for the use of the playing field. That's shocking. The community should be paying for it in their general rates. The clubs have got enough on their plates, raising money to run their clubs and keep kids in sport. And that's what we should focus on. It's not about the money. That comes from the general rate, not from targeted charging. So there's a lot of things in here. Council highlighted some of them. No doubt I've still got a couple of minutes, Mr. Mayor. We talk about halls and pools that are not putting money back into their community, into the council. Well, somebody's let that slip. Somebody hasn't chased it up. Somebody on staff have dropped the ball. If there's issues in that way. We also get caned for not wanting to use the official council email addresses. We're volunteers. We haven't got time to change our password every 30 days, go onto a different website to get our emails. There might be an Official Information Act and everything else. No one's ever called for minutes and stuff or emails between council staff and volunteers. It's a red herring. Huge bits there about why we should axe the committees on page 14. Council has received a number of accounts and evidence suggesting that aspects of committee practice required by council policy have not been and are still not the practice of many committees. Whose fault's that? Whose fault's that? Who's not monitoring from this end of things? And failing to provide updated membership to council, failing to hold and manage elections in accordance with policy. Somebody should be chasing that along if the committees are out of line. Doesn't happen. And we're suggested that if we dump the 70 community committees, well, you can form a community group and still carry on lobbying council. But I suggest there'll be no money for it. Currently, if there's some discretionary money placed with committees and in council's connivance, some of that money goes to pay the secretaries, who are the hardest people to replace in a volunteer organisation. With no funding, what you're doing if you pass this today is setting those committees up to fail. They can't work without council assistance, and that they are the pipeline into council. Where is your opportunity to consult with the community at grassroots if you dump your 70 community committees? Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think that's about what I need to say.
Thank you. Any questions that councillors have, James? Councillor Alexander.
Just a correction. I'm surprised you got your email about bookings for the Rollson Reserve Management Committee meetings for 2021, Jens. As I'm acting chair and secretary of the committee, I replied to a staff member's email on Monday confirming the bookings for the 2021 year at the Rollson Community Centre. So there's clearly, as you say, there's some wires that are crossed because I've confirmed those bookings. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Alexander, and yeah, we'll look into that, try and understand what's happened there. Councillor Hassan.
Look, thanks for your presentation. Just with regards to the structure of incorporated societies, are any of your volunteer groups that you're aware of involved in incorporated societies?
One that I'm a life member of, Councillor Hassan, is the Rollson Residents Association Incorporated, but it's functioned very, very well, and is viewed as a council committee, as a council township committee. It has that relationship. Might have the luxury of perhaps not having to quite toe the line as a council committee and not submit against council decisions. But I've felt it works very, very well. It's distributed its discretionary grants very well. We've built walkways and other things through subdivisions with our grant. We appreciate it. That's to be wiped, and it's a contestable fund. And I can tell you, my experience with the current contestable fund is not very good. Probably because there's not enough money in it.
Thank you. Any further questions? No, Jen, thank you for coming along this morning and presenting that. And thanks to the other guests that have come today, travelled down here for the meeting to be a part of the discussion this morning. So we'll move to report number 1, Group Manager, Community Services and Facilities, and Denise asks you to come to the front of the room.
Sam?
Yes.
Sam, can I just ask a procedural question? We've had, obviously we had Jens present, and I guess a couple of questions. One is we've received quite a few emails over the course of the last 3-4 days. I assume that we will be tabling those as correspondence at some stage, but it raises the bigger question, I guess, and Jens has just raised that about consultation and whether we feel that there is an obligation. I guess is a question, David, for yourself, to say whether we've done that. Looking from the outside, this is not a great look, to be fair, special meeting, and I think we need to address that as a council first before we receive the report. And the third, I guess, is really about, I'd just like to understand that we're going to vote on each of those recommendations separately rather than as a whole. Thank you.
So firstly, let's talk about the word extraordinary meeting. It's at the start of each year, councils will identify the time frame of meetings that they're intending to hold during the course of the year. If there's any meetings outside of that, they come under the heading of extraordinary. So the word is, it's the way you say it, extraordinary, but extraordinary meeting. The second thing is the report that staff have prepared follows a number of workshop discussions that we've had with councillors during the course of the year, and what the content of this report reflects is the thoughts of councillors during those discussions. The reason it was brought to this meeting was to enable discussion, particularly around halls, reserves and pool committees on the one hand, community committees on the other hand. There is a proposed transition time frame. What council will do today is consider A, whether it agrees in block with the recommendations, B, whether it does not agree in block, or C, it may consider taking each of the 10, 11 recommendations one by one and considering how you wish to proceed with those. There has been quite a lot of comment in the community through the Zoom meetings that have been held on a regular monthly basis with community chairs, identifying what we are proposing to do with community committees. So I don't think it's a surprise. I've heard comments about the time of year. Is this the right time of year? My personal view is, given the subject matter, I don't think any time is the right time, be it December, be it February, be it October. It really doesn't matter. But the purpose today is to allow staff to present the report that you have asked them to present, and consider how you will respond, either collectively or individually, to the recommendations that are in front of you. And that may well include Council 11 further consultation in some areas, or it may, on the other side of the equation, talk about the transitional process which staff will develop after recommendations are passed.
And depending on the way that's discussed this morning and we councillors want to go, I mean, maybe that all of, some of, or none of the recommendations that are there will be passed. So we won't know that until we get there, but I'm happy to take them one by one, or if there's some changes to things and people would like to see amendments to the resolutions that are there, that can also happen. Councillor Hess.
Thank you. I just want to actually query my reports. I've been fortunate to actually get 2 copies. One from the Secretary of the Reserve Committee and the Township Committee of Springston that's been attached. The other I have, which is a council meeting starting at 1 p.m. today. And I just want to clarify, for my peace of mind, what should I actually be looking at with regards to the start time? Or am I reading an incorrect document?
The agenda for today's meeting was sent out on Thursday and Friday of last week. Everybody's got that. Clearly identifies the start at 8:30. I'm not familiar with any meeting at 1 p.m. today, Councillor Hassan.
Although, Deborah, the inside page of my agenda at the top does say at 1 p.m.
That's
so
exactly
the cover page correctly identifies the meeting. Once you get into the document on the top of the second page, it has 1 p.m, which I
It does. It does, and that's what I was trying to highlight with regards to procedural issues, with regards to understanding, does that affect the legalities of this particular meeting, especially the time frame that has been given and the public interest that is in this matter. While we've got people sitting here within the facility itself, I can tell you that I have had many calls, conversations in the last couple of days on the street and supermarkets with people asking what is actually going on here. If you weren't at the Volunteers Christmas function, you yourself, Mr. Mayor, you gave a heads up. The rest of our communities, I guess, or the volunteers with our communities, are waiting for some form of consultation. And if I recall correctly, I did ask the question, could this be consultated through the LTP process? And the answer was there was no need. I feel that for democracy, that we do owe our communities the opportunity to come and present to us through a document like our 10-year LTP.
So if I can answer through you, Mr. Mayor. Firstly, legality of the meeting. The meeting was correctly advertised as being 8:30 this morning. Inside of page 2, it does say 1 p.m, and that's a regrettable administrative error, but the front page does say 8:30. I look to my left and I see more people in the public gallery today than I've probably seen collectively all year. So I think that the message has in fact got through. With respect to the process and consultation, Councillor Hassan, that's the next part of the discussion. That may well be an outcome when we consider the recommendations that are in front of us. And so we'll wait for that opportunity.
That covers off those questions, Councillor Hassan. Thank you. Denise, pass over to you.
Tēnā koutou, ki te mihi ki te koromātua, ki te mihi ki ngā kaikauni hira, ki te mihi ki te kaiwhakahaere. The report I present to you today on the topic of community committees of council draws on the previous 2 reports that Council has debated over the previous 18 months. Council has previously rejected some of the suggestions, requested further information be gathered on some matters, and has previously provided new or different information. This report draws on those discussions. A number of these committees and their role has been an increasingly contentious issue over the past 5 to 10 years for Council. Current Council has shown courage by being prepared to deal directly with the difficult issue of too many community committees of Council and an outmoded structure. No other local authority in New Zealand has this number of committees. Selwyn Council is out of step with the rest of New Zealand. To be fair, some councils in other parts of New Zealand have had similar models in the past, but not anymore. Christchurch City has 25. Hurunui has 6. Waimakariri has 7. Ashburton has 21. Northland has 14. Southland has 3. Selwyn is out of step. This report before you deals mainly with those community committees of Council that are responsible for the operations of community halls, centres, pools and reserves. This report is not proposing to stop any committee from continuing to meet and to function. This report is about discharging the obligations and roles on those committees in relation to Council. This report intends that Council staff will work directly with these committees to assist them to discharge their obligations to Council. This is not about Council placing no value on volunteers. Council does place value on volunteers, and Council does want to stay in touch with its communities. This is about the traditional model of committees no longer being fit for purpose. This is about how the traditional committee structure is not actually effective in assisting Council to meet its extensive legal obligations. This is about how the structure is not effective in meeting ratepayers' expectations of Council with particular regards to matters of revenue and access. This is about how this structure has become less reflective of the wider community. And this is about how this structure is increasingly struggling to get new members. There are some outstanding committee volunteers and some outstanding committees. I am sure each of you can name some. This does not make the committee structure right. It most likely means that good things have happened in spite of the structure. I am sure that each of you can equally identify committee member volunteers or committees who have, by their actions, by their inactions, by their comments, have put Council at risk or have given rise to ratepayer and resident complaints to Council. This is about how the face of volunteering is changing. and residents are less able or inclined to commit to the sort of roles and the level of commitment they have in the past. This is about how what started as a number of residents who initially volunteered on committees have now increasingly become paid roles put in place by committees. This is about how committees are no longer as effective a mechanism as they once were for council to share information with the communities or for council to stay in touch with the community. This report is not saying that the current structure has always been wrong. This report is saying that in 2021, the current number and structure is no longer right. In this report, it also suggests that council consider the future of other community committees of council after councillors have been provided with the opportunities to talk directly to those various remaining committees. In so doing, councillors should consider whether the remaining committees do reflect the wider community, whether the remaining committees are active in their communities, and whether the remaining committees do fulfil the role of being a committee of council. This is not a report suggesting Selwyn does not need or value community groups. This report is rather suggesting the various community groups should not be required to act as committees of council with all the obligations entailed.
Okay, kia ora, Denise, thank you for that. It's been acknowledged, and it's, I accept it's a very difficult conversation to have. And as you read through the report and can read the recommendations that are here, if I was sitting on the committee, I think, oh, it's me, oh, it's me, oh, you know, and I can understand the feeling of being a little bit under fire by this from ourselves. I think, and I know that many of our committees have done a good job over many years and have meant that we have had successful communities that are connected, where council has been able to provide services to our communities and look after the assets that we have. And as Denise has pointed out, this isn't a commentary on the last 30 years, it's about setting ourselves up going forward and about being fit for the future. I see this as an opportunity for committees where there are passionate people to remain involved in whatever grouping that they would like to have, but not as subcommittees of council with all the constrictions and restraints that we have to put on committees because of the legislation that council operates under. Not being a committee of council gives you freedom to make your own decisions, to chart your own course, to find funding in lots of places that council is unable to find funding for. And I believe that's a step in the right direction for our committees. We're not actually getting rid of any committees, we're just separating them from council. And so there's a piece of messaging and communication that needs to be clearer, and we need to understand ourselves. I guess the reality is whether or not those committees will want to function without the structure that council provides will be the next question, and that's where there needs to be some conversation with the people that are involved here. And as Denise has outlined, there's a number of really passionate volunteers who want to continue to serve and be a part of whether it's a reserve or a hall or a pool, and we would look to work with those people to continue to be involved. When I think back on some of the work, Denise, that you've done with committees themselves, asking them what they thought of the current structure, probably 6 or 8 months ago now when you did that, everyone said, oh, there's too many committees, you know, and yes, there are some problems, but no one's willing to identify that the problem might be themselves, and that's a very difficult thing to do. And I think of the AAs reports that they do on driver behaviour, and you've got 90% of drivers thinking that they're above average in driver ability. There can only be 50%, but no one's willing to accept that they're not in the top half of drivers. And I think, yeah, sometimes that might be at play here when we're thinking about community committees and how they operate. So there's a number of recommendations here, and as was intimated at the beginning of the meeting, we'll allow some discussion around the table about where councillors are at with this. I don't think that it'll be, I'm saying let's take them one by one and actually work our way through a report if someone's happy to move each one as we go, or there may be adjustments to each one as we go, and then figure out where we end up. And I'll just, David also mentioned the timing of the report. This is on the next available meeting that we had this year. And there's never a nice time to discuss something that involves massive change. And so, yeah, I understand that for our communities and for those that have come along here today as well. We'll go around the table with those that would like to speak. And I think, Deborah, you had your, Sophie, sorry, up first, and Deborah and Mark.
Ina mana ina reo, ina rau rangatia rama, tēnā koutou katoa. I find myself in a strange position today because on the one hand, I agree with a lot of the points that you've made, Denise. I also agree with a lot of the points that Jen's made. I do agree that we have too many committees, but I feel that we're going about this the wrong way. I know that there's been an awful lot of work around it, but the point has been made that while there have been questions asked about how communities feel that their committees are working at the moment and everything else, there's not been an effective sort of co-designed strategy, and the timeframes that are written in the motions here today are too quick to allow that to happen. Most of these committees meet once a month. Between now and March the 15th, I would guess that many of those that are on the list as potentially having relationships in various ways separated will have one meeting. That's not effective in terms of valuing the work that has been done in the current form and co-creating something that will work in the future. Interestingly, yesterday when I was taking a breather from reading this and wondering what to say today, I went and checked my emails from a different role, which is ironically president of an incorporated society. And I found in one email a whakatoki, which from the Charities Commission, which was whakanuia te tangata ringaropa, celebrate the person with calloused hands, value the people who do the work. They may not recognise, and that includes you, Denise. I'm not saying that, you know, just the volunteers. That's everybody's trying their best, but we're kind of coming at a head where we actually have to talk together rather than just making a decision. It doesn't work like that. Volunteering Canterbury also had an email waiting for me, which said, supporting volunteers is creating a great volunteer experience, creating the right conditions so people can flourish. Support is not controlling volunteers, risk avoidance, and policy procedure and process. Now, those came at a pretty interesting time when I had been reading this report again and again. I see that we have, so just looking at Selwyn Central Ward, many of our residents' committees are already incorporated societies. Some of them work very well in that circumstance. They have really good wisdom to share around how that works, how that doesn't work. Chucking others straight into that situation is, you know, it needs a bit more time than this, because we also have another incorporated society that's basically lapsed because there's not enough people there. So what is, you know, when Sam, when you mentioned at the volunteers dinner that this was coming up, there was an awful lot of intense discussion. But actually, I've come to appreciate the fact that you'd said that, because some of those discussions were really valuable, because I spoke to people on committees of council that work very well and other committees of council who describe their atmosphere as toxic. Everybody's got something to teach somebody else, and between now and the 15th of March, there is absolutely no chance that we can write down all of those pros and cons and work out a better model. And regarding the obligations of committees of council, I'd just like to point out again that the obligations of incorporated societies are actually pretty huge as well. This isn't just apples and pears. This is, it's not making life easier unless the structure and support and just working out what will work is there too. Thank you.
Thanks, Sophie. Just thinking about the timing that you've mentioned, do you have a better time? Is there a way that you're thinking about the timing of things that would change from what's in the report? I mean, obviously it would change, but out to when?
To be honest, I'd give it a year of talking to people regularly, set up some local, work out some work streams that you can invite people from different types of committees from different locations and get them to talk together. We've had capability workshops before, which have been great, but they've all been held in Eastern Selwyn. That doesn't really necessarily help if you're out in Malvern or even out in Leiston, because they started at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So who's going to get there after work? And I just realised one other point that I just thought I'd make. You mentioned that Southland has reduced their community committees to 3. We should also note that they have 9 community boards. So that does seriously increase their ability to consult with their community.
Thanks, Sophie. You've covered a lot of ground and really appreciate it because I have similar thoughts. My question arises, I guess, being able to consult. If we can't consult through the LTP process, because the 31st of March is going to come before we actually release our draft LTP. So some of the thinking of around how do we consult, the LTP process is not going to work for what is actually here, because we probably won't have gone out to consultation before the 31st of March. We certainly wouldn't have heard the submissions and made a decision by the 31st of March. So thanks for bringing that time frame. I think it's way too short. I do support Sophie and the suggestion that we need to actually go out and talk to our community committees about this. They don't know enough information. The other is my area of interest is democracy. How do we, sitting here representing our ratepayers, understand what our ratepayers are to bring the policy through to council if we don't have a place where we can actually have an opportunity to talk to them at community committees? And some community committees, yes, you'll always get those that want to be stronger at voicing their opinion than others, but that's democracy. That's no different than how we operate around this council table. And I think it's very, very important that all of us sitting around here realise that we're voted on, we represent the views of the community. The only person we employ is the chief executive. The chief executive then operates through policy structure down through to the staff. So I think it's very, very important that we understand why we're all elected and sitting around this table with the current democracy process that we do have. I always said we're throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And if you do that, it's very, very hard to make amends and get things back, put the wheels back on track again. I think a lot of these community committees, they have a lot of local knowledge that we don't yet have as a new growing council organisation, increase in staffing. And how do you gain that knowledge if you can't go out to your community and actually talk to them? You are going to need community committees in one structure or another. And if you make it too hard for them to go down the track of forming incorporated societies, which is a cost in itself, then we are not going to get the appropriate feedback for us to make policy around this council table for the benefit of our communities. And lastly, I'd like to highlight that the most people interested in voting for us and putting this here are those that are associated with the community committees. They're the ones that go out and vote. We often complain about the fact that we have low voting turnout. why nobody knows who we are, and they're just not interested. But those that put us here are the volunteers, are the ones who are interested, and we need to work alongside them. And if we've got major policy changes, we need to take people with us. I think I've said enough. Thank you.
Kia ora, and thank you. This is a difficult report, and I think it's already been said that most of us agree we have too many community committees in our district. And yet, when push comes to shove and we talk about reformation of the system, we all duck for cover. We are elected to do the hard things. We are elected to represent the district, not our township, not our ward, but the district. I would like recommendation 4 when we come to discuss it and vote on it, to be extended. It talks about allowing council committees to continue to have rooms available for the 2021 calendar year, but not the incorporated societies that we already treat as township committees. I think that's unfair. I would like it to be all committees listed in Appendix 2 and Appendix 3 to have that privilege if we adopt this for the 2021 year. It allows all committees to have that booking, that free room hire for the next calendar year while they look at their future. It's fair. And I think that's an important thing. Another thing I'd like to be firmer in this report and the recommendations is that council commits to biannual meetings between sports clubs and council staff, autumn and spring, for our reserves, to review the previous season and plan the next. Certainly here in Rollston, there are grounds at which multiple sports clubs share ground. By having these biannual meetings, you can sort out what worked well and what didn't work in the last season and plan for the next. It's important that they understand that they have to share the grounds amicably. I've seen it over my 26 years in the district when it's not sorted. There are enormous conflicts around training and playing on shared grounds. So I think committing to biannual meetings, not just meetings when we feel like it, but actual committing to biannual meetings to give them the reassurance that we are interested, we will listen to them, and we will learn from previous seasons and plan for the next. On page 32 of the report, there's budgets listed. Interestingly enough, there's no budgets for the Rollston Community Centre and the Rollston Reserve, which I found extraordinary. These are council committees. Council manages these budgets, but there's no budgetary information listed. That's really extraordinary. The information is directly at hand to council, and yet the report didn't list it. You'd find that they are actually quite significant budgets. Managed, the Rollston Reserve Committee, managed by council staff, the Rollston Community Centre rather, the Rollston Reserve managed by the Reserve Management Committee in conjunction with council staff. Another thing that's not yet been explained is why the Selwyn Central Ward and the Springs Ward are hardest hit by the timing in these reports. These two wards will have all their committees disestablished or not recognised by the 15th of March. All their committees. Incorporated societies will not be recognised. Council committees will be disestablished. I can't quite get my head round why these two wards, it happens at the 15th of March, and the other wards, it happens much slower pace. Is it that the eastern wards are much more adaptable and flexible and able to take change quicker, and the western wards are not? Well, so I'd like an answer to that. And I think, Sam, you're a little naive when you say we're not getting rid of committees and just separating from council. Without council support, many of these committees will stop. For some of them, that is actually the right outcome. But others who are adding value to their community and to council, that is not the right outcome. I think we could have it look at it further. There could be assistance for the committees where they are adding value to remain as incorporated societies. A little funding perhaps for the incorporated societies fees and some room hire funding wouldn't be onerous, would be fair, would show that council recognises the value they are. And to Deborah, actually our incorporated societies do add value and do represent our communities and are sources of consultation. In this ward, we've never had council township committees. They have always been, certainly the last 25 years, incorporated societies who have acted as council committees, who have provided that liaison, who have managed discretionary funds, as well as community committees. They have had the advantage that when it comes to submitting, they're not hobbled by council. They have been able to submit on behalf of their committees and their communities on everything. Not going by the fiction of having the chair submit in their own name when it's actually the community committee's report. So I see value in incorporated societies, but I think council has to do more to support them and continue their work. A good example I can give is the West Melton traffic lights. The incorporated society there is what supported council in our endeavours to get the traffic lights, but also were able as an incorporated society to publicly lobby to get those traffic lights. Our pressure and their pressure has resulted in NZTA bringing a project forward to install traffic lights at their busy intersection. A great win for the community done by council and community. I don't want that lost in these changes.
Thanks, mate. That's so shame if you didn't see who it was.
You go, Jeff.
Thank you, mate. If you like. You always
have. Tihei Māori ora. Inga mana e ngā reo e rau koromatua e Sam, kai whakahaere e David, kai kauni hera o Waikirikiri, he tangata o Waikirikiri and the people here with us today. Ngā mihi kia koe, Denise, for your report. I guess as a new councillor, it's one of those big decisions that we make in our second term, second year of the first term, and it is a big decision. And I'm very respectful of the community committees and acknowledge all of the effort that they've put in over the many years that they've been here to build our communities and our district. To them, I say thank you very much, and I acknowledge all the effort. When we say we haven't consulted and there's been no consultative discussions, well, this conversation has actually been going for 10 years. In the last 18 months, we've been talking with our communities and we've been asking for the response. It's the councillor's responsibility to set the direction for our staff, and that's exactly what we've done. So I've seen the emails, I've seen the pointed accusations at staff, and really, as councillors, we are responsible. We're responsible for the direction. And today we're setting the direction. We've set the direction. This is the report that's come back after the last 18 months of consultation, and obviously the last 10 bloody years. And now it's the community committees direction that'll set the future for our communities. And if there had been a collaborative process and relationship from the start, it may have been an easier process for our communities to come to that decision. As I look around the room today, I see many of the long-term serving committee members and heads, and I ask, where are our young people? Where's the engagement from our young people? And I'll tell you where, they're probably at work. They don't have the time. They're working to support their families, to which they've moved into our new district, because we are the fastest growing district in New Zealand. How are we setting direction for those new people coming into the district? We need to find collaborative ways that actually include them and bring them through as the new committee members. The future is here. The future is upon us, and it's in this room today. We spoke a couple of weeks ago about Maori Awards. Well, that actually went through pretty quickly, and it went through in about, I don't know, an hour and a half worth of discussions. If we're talking about collaborative and inclusive communities, then I ask the community members and community committees how we've actually engaged our Māori, our tangata whenua, our mana whenua relationships as treaty partners. Where are the community committees that involve our Pacific Islanders and our immigrants and You know, we've got 70 committees here. None of them are actually representative of Māori, even though they are involved within the communities and they perform and activities there. Denise has touched on the current model being out of date and out of touch, out of step. And I'd agree with that. We've got community committees out there that are still operating with 8 people and making decisions for our townships without the collaborative effort from the community that they represent. And that needs to change. We need to engage everybody within our committee. And this is what this report actually does. It gives time for our community committees to actually engage further into communities, to bring them in, to ask them what they want. And then we'll come back and decide from there. What I've seen is from my past experience over the last year has been some divisive communication and actions. And, you know, when you look at organizations that aren't running effectively, you look to the leaders and you wonder how effective they are in their leadership. If there's anyone to blame, then it's generally the person at the top. That needs to change. The communication needs to be more effective. We need to be collaborative in our approach. Again, I'd say that as councillors, we are responsible for the direction of our staff. We give them the direction. It's now time for the community committees to give direction to the people so that we can move forward in a new direction for the fastest growing district in New Zealand and seize the opportunity that we have. Tēnā tātou katoa. Ngā mihi.
Yeah, thank you for that, and thank you, Shane. It's similar thoughts that I had, very similar to what Shane has just expressed. But perhaps if I could start with a question to you, Denise. It's not your wish to get rid of volunteers, but to actually simply change the system within which we run the community committees and reserves. Is that how I hear it?
Yes, it's allowing council to directly engage with the user groups, the clubs and the volunteers rather than at arm's length via a committee.
Yeah. So I've heard a number of us say, but firstly, I'd like to thank those who have actually emailed me, because it's always nice to get a different perspective. And I read them, and I saw one came through at 5:12 at midnight last night. Actually, I was still up and I read that as well, and it was quite a nice one from a hall committee. I'd also like to sit here and as I sit here and thank Denise, because you know we've done it time and again. You know, when you're sitting at the council, and I know this sounds terrible, but when you're sitting at the council, it's just us in the room. It's easy to make a decision, and we say, right, we'll get our staff member to do this and do that and do the other, and they do, and they do it to the best of their ability, and they do it generally as we've asked them. But when the rubber hits the road, so to speak, and we have to front our communities, sometimes our resolve weakens. But one for perhaps courage, which I know we all have within us. But two, another reason is that we actually sit down and we get a chance to reflect on and listen to what other people are saying. And, you know, I value also, Jens, your input this morning, where you have spoken directly to us. But I've heard people saying in this room, we want to get rid of committees. Now, I don't want to get rid of committees, but I would like to see them reused in a more effective way. I see the difficulty that we have is, and we're I think that we're reading this incorrectly. I think what we should be trying to do is working out a system or a way forward that the committees can feel valued. And I think that's probably the sticking point that we've got, is that I certainly as a council don't want to get rid of committees, but I would like to see them realign, because I do see some committees that really don't function very well and actually aren't really representative of their communities. But I don't think that we can cherry pick, this committee's not working and that committee's not working. So we really do need to sweep the floor clear and start again. But then it comes down to a trust factor. do our committees, our current committees, trust us enough as councillors to believe that we will put in place a volunteer system that works effectively for them? And that's the difficulty that we have here. And that, reflecting on the emails and just sitting here thinking and listening to what other people have said, I see the difficulty is that we have not given us enough time to reflect on it. And I'm not saying that we should put it off. My personal opinion is I'm supportive of this report and that we've got to get rid of committees as we have them. But I would like perhaps to dwell a little bit on how we can reassure the committees that will remain, or who want to remain, or who want to reform. How can we reassure them that they will be valued, and how can we make that continue? Because it may well be that Denise values them, but perhaps the person that takes over from Denise when we're here for many years might not. We need a system to make sure that they're valued. And that's how I see it. So I can't really see how we can get around that problem until we've reflected on it a little bit more. But that's just an interim thought. I'll listen to everyone else's thoughts first.
Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah, firstly, thanks, Denise. You have reflected the discussions we've had, and it's a difficult task, and Jeff's just alluded to that. You've brought back to us, after repeated conversations, what we've instructed you to do. And as Jeff said, it looks a bit less palatable when you sit here in a room with people sitting behind you, analysing what you're saying. But that is our job. We have to be brave and acknowledge Shane's speech and Sophie's as two new councillors to this table. That's great courage, and you've come into the light today, and I acknowledge that from both of you. And I'll paraphrase a comment that John Campbell made after the shootings. I look forward to becoming an old man in a community where you're leading us. I think this is symptomatic. I think there's two distinct decisions to make today from my perspective, and I'll go into that later. I think we have obligations here to do certain things and make those difficult decisions. And they're not necessarily going to be popular, but they are for the betterment. Now, like many of you, I've been around community committees. I've chaired one. I've run a community pool, and that's not unique amongst us here. But I have to fight the grumpy old man syndrome, and I do my best to do that around this table. It's difficult, as we all know, for those of us in that demographic. But times have changed and moved on, and we have to reflect that. And Shane, you articulated that very well. This is not a disestablishment of committees as such, or volunteerism. It's a disestablishment of the current model and a chance for us to revisit that. It's also reflective of the fact that we've got obligations here. We don't have the luxury of having an opinion without a decision. We also don't have a luxury of an opinion without a consequence. And that's really important distinction to make here. If I was sitting outside of this table, I could have any number of opinions about where we go, but that isn't the crux of the matter. We've got to think very carefully, and Denise, you sidestepped it around it a wee bit, and for obvious reasons. We know of two serious incidents we've had in the last wee while that could have left this council and those committees in a very serious position. Now, our health and safety obligations are very real. And the Health and Safety Act has been in place for 5 years, and we've sidestepped around those and tried our best to accommodate it. What we are saying today, if we adopt this, is that we take control of those obligations. That is our role as PCBU. It's also us that will bear the consequences of that. And by us, I mean staff. We cannot put staff in a position where they're left vulnerable because of the actions of someone who has not played the game. So put Health and Safety Chair of Audit and Risk hat, on. I have to support this direction. I'm not doing justice to my role here as a councillor by not doing that. Now, that said, we have to encourage these committees to become functional under that regime. There's extremely good people out there, and I'm sitting here thinking of those, as we said, I'm thinking of those people as I say it. I want them to still be involved because they do damn good work, and they've put us in a position in this community over a good however many 100 years, perhaps, multiple decades anyway, of having the facilities that we have here now. We must accommodate that. And I have confidence, Denise, in your team to have those conversations. I have confidence in us. Shane and I have engaged directly. Yes, it might appear to have been a surprise. We've actively gone out and engaged with those committees that we've had and fronted this with them and gone to the meetings and raised it and made phone calls to do that. They're difficult conversations, but the ones we have to make. So I see that as halls and reserves. The minute we passed district-wide rating on halls and reserves, this was inevitable. And the Health and Safety Act and others, Denise, you've listed them, we have to have the overall driver of that. And the only way to do that is to take control of them. That does not mean those committees disappear or their value to us disappears. It means that we have to have the ultimate responsibility. The second one, and I've raised this around the table in discussions, is the community committees, as in the township committees or whatever. That discussion, I've said, I think cannot be done not in conjunction with our representation review. I think it's pivotal. It is, as Deborah said, part of the democratic process, and it's valuable to us as a filter to our community. We can't separate that out from the other decision in my mind. They are pivotal, but the obligations of those two things are different. One has an operational and a health and safety risk. The other clearly just has a democratic portion to it. So my emotional head says, you know, having served on those committees, this is a terrible shame, but times have moved on. And the conversations that we've had from both the sides of this table here tell us the direction of this new community, not the old man who's sitting over here. Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry, Mary, just thinking your comment about representation review. Yep. So your suggestion is to leave the township committees until after a representation review decision has been made, because the representation review won't take into it or can't take into account community committees. They're a subcommittee of this council, but you're just saying the timing of that needs to wait till that initial decision.
What I'm saying by that, Sam, we had an initial proposal, which is no longer in this paper, about a ward-based group to replace individual township committees. That's virtually impossible to enact when we don't know what the wards will look like. So I think we've got to do that in conjunction. This is my personal view, and it could be rejected. I'm not chairing the committee, and that's at the discretion of the chair, obviously. This is my view, but I think we need to have that conversation in a wider context. And Shane's raised it. Do they represent our community any longer? And that's not necessarily a fault of those committees. It's frankly, you know, they're not exactly exciting places to be, as it's probably like that around this table at times. You know, why would young people want to be on that? I don't know. I'm not a young person anymore, but clearly they don't to a large degree. So we've got to have a system that enables that diversity of our community, and it is more diverse, to come forward and be part of the democratic process. So that's the crux of it, Sam. I'm not offering you a solution, but I think it's absolutely integral that that representation review is part of that process, from my perspective.
Yeah, personally, I agree with what Sophie said at the start, and I think with the conversation that's going around this table, it's not definite one way or the other. I think we've all got different views on this, which makes it very, very difficult. But, you know, I'm disappointed in the timing. I'm disappointed in the time that we're given to speak about this, because I think in the time we've got, I don't think we'll do it full justice. You talk about consultation. I've been involved with a township committee and a hall, and I've been advocating that they join together for our community to be better. So in the last few weeks, we've just got an agreement from the CEO that we do this. So this is a real shock to the people. This is a real shock. This is different to, I've been going out there and saying to people, this is what we do. We're going to have to look at committees. I believe there has to be change. I definitely believe there has to be change. But I don't think we've given the community enough to work on, and we're making a decision. My phone hasn't stopped for 4 days, basically. And at some stage it's been on two phones of people in our community. So obviously by that, I don't think we've taken the people with us. I really don't. And I think if this was put off for a few months so that councillors could go to each meeting, talk to the people, discuss on it, I think we'd have a totally different outcome to what we've got today. There's a couple of things that really disappoint me, is the fact that the use of our halls, and we've put a time limit on that for a year. It's really not good if you start trying, in our smaller communities especially, to start up a new committee and then say, well, you know, we'll give you this for till the end of the year, but after that, well, we don't really know what we're going to do. And I don't even think that needs to be in there, because that is, I think that we would encourage people to use our halls. That's what we build them for. And someone suggested to me the other day, oh, well, we could use our houses and we could go to that because we won't be able to afford to pay to use halls. I think that's against new committees. You take where I live, you've got small rating areas and such like, and you've got Kerwee, Glentunnel and Sheffield will end up paying the district-wide rate, and this is in this report, that you'll end up paying the district-wide rate, and they'll also be paying for their own halls to be maintained and such like, because at some stage it says that they're going to be handed over to the community. I think this is double dipping on the council. I don't agree with that whatsoever. I've never agreed with it with Kerwee, and I don't definitely agree that it should go to other halls. It's an impediment to people keeping their halls. The other thing is, if you look at the rating for keeping the Kerwee, Glentunnel, Glenroy and Sheffield halls, it's extremely minimal. I didn't know that till this week. It's something like $2 per ratepayer in the report. That's minimal. But as a councillor, I didn't know these till very recently. So not only are the community in the dark, so have I been, to be quite honest. Might be my fault. Maybe I haven't read all the stuff that should have done. But I'm, you know, and the other thing is, it's really just a query, and I asked it a week ago and I've never had an answer. Where does this leave the community board in Melbourne? What is their function going to be in the future? Is it going to be trying to help set up new committees? Probably it might not be there in the future, but it's just a point. So, to be honest, I'm for changes, and I've said to you that I'm for changes. I think there are, and initially I thought the changes, as I said before, were going to be the joining of committees to make it better for a community, to have a bigger range of people in each community. And then all of a sudden, well, you know, and I find for little tiny places, you've got Lake Coleridge and places like that, it's going to be fairly difficult for them to set up a new committee without a bit of help from council. Thank you.
Thanks for the report, Denise. I mean, this is quite obviously quite hard going forward and how this manages, and listening to what everyone is saying. We've got a number of different views, and I, like Mo, was very impressed with what Sophie and Shane have said. That really hit the nail on the head. I, like others at this table, started at a township committee. I was the chair of the Rollson Residents Association, and that was really my stepping stone to coming onto council. So do have an understanding of the value of those committees in our community. I have had questions raised of me about the process and what we've gone through to get to the decision that we have. And we keeps being said that we want to keep committees, but we can't keep committees if we can't bring them along with us on the journey. And it's really quite hard to work out or try and get a path forward on how's the best way to do that. And that's where it's good, some of the points that Sophie raised about with volunteering Canterbury and those sorts of groups. Because one thing that I've regularly brought up is my concern about social wellbeing is something that we need to consider as being councillors. It's now back in the Local Government Act. And for a number of our volunteers, this is some way of them having a good social wellbeing. They've got a purpose on what they're doing. They've got an avenue to go and talk to others and regularly meet with others. I mean, some people in our community who are very isolated, and we need to consider these sorts of things. And we've said we do want to keep volunteers, and I think I don't know what sort of process we've got for keeping them engaged, but I think that's something that we need to work on, and that can be done through a more extended process of talking about potentially with these committees. I agree with what Mark said around the user groups, and a note that I'd made for myself was actually to make sure we've got a user group model actually in place and working, and knowing that it's working before we then disestablish the other things, because fundamentally, to make sure our reserves and our halls are working correctly, is we need to have that feedback from the user groups. And I'm not sure about the setup that we've got at the moment. And I also agree about looking at the hierarchy of the halls where we're paying for it at the moment, and consideration on those for all the groups that we've got. Mark brought up about our incorporated societies. I'd seen that they were left off the list. I mean, they were originally included when we were talking about halls and community centres charges. And finally, I mean, I have to back what Murray was saying with regard to, and what Denise has put in a report about legislation and our obligations. And I mean, in my role as Deputy Chair, as well as of the Audit and Risk Committee, it is quite a concern that we make sure that we are complying with the legislation. And so it's quite a number of things that we need to be careful of when we're looking going forward, with particular on committees generally, and that needs to be right. Otherwise, whatever council in the future will be sitting around potentially having the same conversation. So we want to make sure what we're doing is being done right now.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks, Denise, for the report. As all of you around the table will know, I'm very much a community person, and at this stage I've got great fears for the communities in Melbourne. I've had a lot of consultation, correspondence I should say, from various people and volunteer workers about consultation process. Now, you say we've got 70 committees. Have council staff spoken to each of those committees individually, or has all the consultation been done by email? One volunteer that spoke to me mows the reserve, uses his own time, he's a volunteer, his own petrol to do so, and gets lots of comments of the ground. He asked the question of where to now? Why should I do it? Where's the money going to come from to pay for extra staff to do the extra work? Taking the responsibility off the committees means council will have to employ extra staff to do this extra work. Where's the money coming from? You did say that committees are not fit for purpose, and I've also got a comment there about the community board, so I'm just wondering if you can elaborate on that. I personally don't want to get rid of the committees because I believe we're going to have a lot of problems. Now, the other thing, Denise, just one quick question. On page 20, you've got effective from 3rd of May 2021, we will cease grants, relationships and other treatments for Arthur's Pass Community Centre and Castle Hill Association. And then on page 22, you've got councillors interested in negotiating a formal agreement with Arthur's Pass and with Castle Hill. If we're getting rid of these committees, should that conversation not been held before now? So I think there's a lot of questions still in this report that need to be answered before we decide where we're going. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Sam. And I've been deliberately just listening through the process to understand the wider view. I guess I want to open by talking about the current structure, and I really don't want to devalue the work of our volunteers because I think we should acknowledge the history of Selwyn and where these volunteers and what they've given to our community. Largely, they have developed our community infrastructure single-handedly, whether through fundraising and God knows, we've all been there. It's difficult. I look at Jens and what he's brought to Rollson, his own capacity with the drive and energy around the Rollson Community Centre and the Rollson Reserve and where it is now. So I think firstly we need to acknowledge the past and talk to the people that have delivered all this community infrastructure to us and said, you've done a wonderful job, and there's still a role for volunteers in this community, and so let's open with that for a start off. I guess then you turn to the discomfort points, and let's just rip the scab off them and talk to them directly. I feel pretty discomfort around the timing of this today, not the content, the timing. It generally gives you the feel that let's bang this through before Christmas and over the holidays, and people can forget about it while the holidays are on. So, but that doesn't detract from the content. It's the timing and the perception in the community, I suppose. You raise the question internally, and the question I've asked myself is, are we doing this to make it easier for ourselves or better for our community? And again, that's the kind of question you want to ask yourself. And I think one of the questions that I enjoy, I particularly enjoy Jens coming in here because he makes us feel uncomfortable. But isn't that great? And we want people like Jens. We want people to come in here and talk to us and tell us our failings and things that aren't going right. But I think the danger that we've all seen here today is that we're confusing operation and management of council facilities with representation. That's the danger we have here. And we still want to hear from our community. We still want to hear them come to us and talk to us about their concerns, but we're using the halls and reserves committees as a proxy for that. And that's not the way we want representation. We want the ability for Jens to come and make me feel uncomfortable, to talk about issues. We want other people to come from their communities and talk about their issues, but not using the proxy vehicle, using the correct channel. And so just talking to the report, Mark's right. Staff have delivered what we asked them. They've looked at the issues. This is not anywhere near what we started with. It's been through a lot of revisions. And I think we need to talk about what Selwyn is now. And it's a two-part economy, really. We've got the largely urbanised, really strongly growing eastern side, and we've got a large traditional western side, which is really still in largely a similar position to what it was, 20 years ago. So let's acknowledge that. Let's not walk away from that. But how do we make this work and work for our communities? So I see in the eastern side, and I'm at the coalface, and what have we got here? We've got a large population of urban people who are working, who have high expectations of level of service, and we have got sophisticated facilities in place. Jens has been so successful that the staff employed, it's a major operation and should be run by the council. We've got now large-scale facilities that would deserve to be run professionally, and that we congratulate our volunteers in getting to that stage. But this is the reality, is that they need professional management now to provide the level of service that's required for our communities. But then if you look back in history, why are all these committees here? They're here because the council never had the resources to manage the facilities they do. These people have been proxy councillors or council workers for 50 years, basically, looking after our community facilities gratis and doing it on a basis. And so, Mark asked, why Selwyn and Springs first? And the answer, in my view, is because Selwyn and Springs are largely already there. The staff are professionally managing a majority of the facilities. Some of the community committees are meeting on a regular basis, but the value is diminishing as staff input increases. So, in my view, I would like to see probably at a 4A in our paper today is that we proceed with the options in front of us, but as a 4A, we stop for it. We have a pause. Let's be big enough to review the effectiveness of the transition before we start the stage 2 implementations. Let's not be so above ourselves that we can't admit, geez, we've got this wrong. We need to stop here and have a bit of review and do some manipulation and before we start going to stage 2 of this. And what I've heard today is that there's still a desire for real engagement with our communities and the ability for us to hear them. But let's not use the proxy vehicles. Let's create a vehicle which works for them. So one of the sort of final concerns is, and I have addressed this with the staff, I wonder whether we've underestimated the amount of volunteer work that's put in which we were required to be picked up by paid Selwyn District Council employees, because out in the community, there's hours and hours and hours of people who do small things which make our communities better places to live. I've been assured that we have the capacity and ability to do that. I'm still uncertain if that's true, but I'm prepared to try it in Springs and Central, and let's see how we go. But with proviso, let's stop and actually understand the effectiveness before we go further. Thank you.
Thanks, Grant. Welcome.
Yeah, well said, Grant. There's a lot of things I'm in full agreement with you there. Just to give you some background, I'm in Prebbleton. We've had a Prebbleton Residents Association probably since amalgamation in 1989. It's always been an incorporated society. The council, when it merged in 1989, I was first a councillor in 1992. We had very little money. There wasn't money going into community facilities. There wasn't money going into parks and reserves. And we had to battle for every dollar we could get. We also had to take on meadow mushrooms who was thinking out the community. And the only way we could do that was to set ourselves up into a body where we could attract funding from outside places. And we could disagree with the Selwyn District Council at the time, of which we did in a large way. And it's worked damn well. So don't be afraid of incorporated societies. It does give you the opportunity to tap into Rata Foundation. It gives you the opportunity, as we've seen for many years in annual plans and things here, to submit against the council when you think they've got it wrong. It does work. And the comment that I hear around the table is we're getting rid of committees. This is not intended to get rid of committees at all. This is intended to give committees that very freedom I just talked about with an incorporated society. I've been bringing my community along with this because we started talking about this over 18 months ago in the last term of council when we looked at district-wide rating. And I've been gradually preparing my communities and say change is coming. Our reserve committee in Prebbleton now meets, it might only meet quarterly after our last meeting. We have a reserve which a huge amount of volunteer work went into expanding a few years ago. We spent over $1 million. And we've got a top quality reserve. It's an exemplar to how to run a reserve. Our reserve committee still has great feedback with our staff as to maintenance and how it's done and the operational side of who wants it when. And they're still willing to carry on doing that, but they don't feel they need to have a meeting there every month. And we have a meeting every 2 months at the moment, and it's a very convivial meeting, as many of our community meetings are, where they're a chance for our community to get together and have a conversation. So, the conversation, Springston's Reserve and Township Committee, I believe, is also amalgamated over the last time. So we are seeing we're getting rid of those. We have workshopped this multiple times in the last few months, councillors. So, you should be very aware of what's in it. And I would have hoped that you had brought some of the things that we're thinking of to your community to get them along the pathway. As I say, we are not getting rid of committees. We are separating them as legal entities from Selwyn District Council for very good reason. And I believe that as we have had talk of consultation and democracy, there's still the ability to consult. There's still the availability to be involved. And I look back on my experience with the communities in the past, and yes, in the early days, issues were brought up on a great number of issues at those meetings, brought for me to take that to council and battle for my community. Over the last 10 years, fewer and fewer issues are coming to my committee. They're coming to me on the phone, or they're coming to me as an email, or they're coming directly in on Snapsend and Solve. So I might get, I had a meeting last night. I didn't have any issues brought up last night at the meeting we had to bring to bear. By the way, there's carols at the cottage at Rebelton tonight if you want to come and sing. So I think that feedback loop of issues is changing. I think Grant made comment about how we feedback before. I do think that we could perhaps delay the 15th of March till June the 30th to allow people to get their head around it. I think that would be a very good thing to do, just to let people know what incorporated societies involve and what sort of framework you might have to go. And I do agree with Bob and with Mark as far as the use of the halls. Many of these buildings are there because the community fundraised for them and the community have fixed them. They've put the roof on, they've put the paint on, they've repaired the floor, all the things, they've rebuilt the kitchen, all the things they've done over the last 50 years. And if they weren't for the community, they wouldn't be there. So I think it's beholden upon us as a council that if we do have an incorporated society, residents association, they get the use of that hall for nothing. They're there. They're still there I'm hoping that they'll still invite their councillors along to their incorporated societies so that we can hear what they want to say. But I do think that they shouldn't have to go in a queue to get funding to hire the hall. I think that should be just, you get it once a month or whatever for that time frame, and that's part of the deal. And I think that's our way forward, because after all, we've all volunteered. We all know the volunteerism we've seen in the community. I think we'll still see that volunteerism. And quite frankly, Jenny, I'm worried when you talk about somebody in a reserve who's supplying their own petrol and doing things. I think the chairman of the Audit and Risk Committee just became an older man when he heard that a minute ago.
It's dedication from the Melbourne residents.
It is, and Jenny, I agree, and we see that dedication. We've had that dedication from our residents as well. And the best thing we can get is the people who are caretakers for our reserves that are paid for by our council. If they are local people, then we get the extra mile, which we find time and time again. So I think, don't be fearful. We can still do this. We have to do this. 70 committees. It is an anachronism. They've evolved from my time as a young councillor. They've just stayed there. And we do have to move on, but we've got to make sure the model works. So let's tread carefully and get there.
Thanks, Malcolm, and thank you to everyone for your thoughts and the varied backgrounds that you've brought to this discussion, and obviously the concern that you have for this topic. Thanks for the emails that have been received by many of us and for the presentation and people coming here today. Paddy Mackay is here. It's my first Township Committee chairperson. When I first got into being involved in council committees was with Paddy and Stu. On the Darfield Township Committee, and so they are an avenue for people to get involved in local democracy, as I have. I'm really relieved that we're having this conversation, and it's sort of been asked, why have we rushed it, and why does it seem like it's just all happening before Christmas? I don't particularly think that Christmas is a reason not to have it. It's a discussion that's actually been needed to have for a long time, and I'm really relieved that this is happening in a public place, that everyone is now aware of some of the things that have been discussed. That I'm not the only one at a Christmas function standing up and saying, well, I think that council's going this way. And now councillors are all able to share with anyone that they're talking to, and the public is as well, the information that we currently have in front of us. There have been a number of questions asked here, but I just wonder about process. And I'm just going to suggest two options. One is that I think one on the board really makes sense. It's there and it's one and it's in recess. Suggesting that a new two would be the council work with our current council committees through to the 1st of June 2020 on a change process to be implemented from the 1st of July 2020 to, 21, yeah, next year, to ensure council can continue to meet our community expectations and legislative requirements. And that would just allow some of the concerns that have been raised in the room and some of the feedback that we've had around timing. It's not about direction, it's saying change needs to happen, but timing could be an important part in that to be implemented from July 2021. And that would enable the committees to be a part of this, for community to feedback into it. And that may help some of the concern that's in the room. If that were to pass, then we wouldn't need to run through the rest of the bits that are in the report, other than 8, and I think it was repeated a couple of times, which prior to June 2021, any community committee or council may choose to disestablish itself if it chooses that of its own accord, if the approved motion is minted at the community committee meeting and communicated to and approved by the chief executive.
Doesn't address your proposed clause does not address the status of those incorporated societies which are currently acting as de facto, if not de jure, township committees in the Selwyn Central and the Springs ward.
Correct, it doesn't.
And so you're going to need clause 3 that addresses that situation, or amend your proposed clause 2 to include those, which I think you could allow 6 months for those as well. It wouldn't be unreasonable to allow them the same.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. Look, we're running way away from meeting protocol here. If you're going to make an amendment, we need to make an amendment and debate it, not have laissez-faire running it on the table. That's not the way a meeting runs.
Well, it's currently being put on the board so that councillors can see where it's.
Is it an amendment proposed as a motion? That's what we need to have.
Yeah, it's a proposed amendment that's been put on the board, and once you can read it, then it can be put.
And amendment is 1 and 2 only. 1, 2, 8.
Yeah.
So the amendment, for clarity, is 1, 2, and 1. Sorry, the new 2, which is in red.
Sorry,
and what was 8 has now become.
It's not an amendment. There's been no motion put. No. So this is going up there so we can take each item one by one, and we work through number 1 and number 2. And if number 2 passes, we won't need to do the rest of them. If number 2 fails, then we'll continue working through 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. So I'll move 1. Someone happy to second 1? Councillor Mugford. Is there any further discussion on 1? All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Declare it carried. Number 2, I'm happy to move number 2. Is there a seconder? Councillor Hassan. Is there any discussion on number 1? And Councillor McInnes?
Partly around the existing incorporated societies, are they included within current council committees? Because elsewhere we've already noted that they are effectively acting as it, even though they are not. I still reckon the time frame is a wee bit short, but depending on how much engagement, how quickly and how well structured it is to try and achieve those aims, it's possible, but it needs to be pretty well sorted. And seeing as we're doing this right now and we've got 6 months, it would be somebody's going to have to work really quickly.
The intention is that it would be the existing arrangements carry on, so they can say including incorporated societies if that adds clarity. With the approval of the seconder, I'm happy for that to.
Can I suggest an alternative wording, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, I'll just. Councillor Hassan, are you happy if that was included?
I was actually going to clarify the need for us to understand the consultation process. So I think with regards to this particular issue, I'd like to see if we're palatable to having it as a special consultative process, like we did with we've got a report on here with the Rollson Town Centre Master Plan, where the communities can come and present to us So it's not a fait accompli. I mean, some ideas might come out that we might want to just implement beside what we think the policy should be like that. So I'd like to understand, if we're not going to do it through the LTP process, that we have a special consultative process. I think we really have to actually manage democracy with our community in the correct process, not just a fait accompli. So I'd like to see a special consultation process report come back.
Yeah, there may be an outcome from making this decision, but a special consultative process is actually quite restrictive and would actually limit, I think, the range of interaction we might want to have with our committee and communities afterwards. So we'll have that discussion when we get there, but let's not limit ourselves now to what change might look like until we've made a decision on whether or not this stands, because it may not. This may lose, in which case we'll just move through with the rest of the recommendations. Councillor Alexander?
I would suggest a better wording, if you looked at the original recommendations, would be work with our current committees as specified in Appendix 2 and 3, because they are already tabulated in those two appendices.
Yeah, great.
And that would make it clear the committees we're talking about, not because there are other incorporated societies in our district.
Mark?
And with that amendment, and assuming that we're also picking up Clause 8 later on, I'm happy to support these recommendations.
Yeah, thank you. Sophie?
Sorry, quick question. It says through to the 1st of June, so seeing as effectively, should it be the 30th of June?
I was thinking that by the 1st of June, we would need to have completed that process to allow a report to be written.
Effectively, we're allowing 4 months because January is pretty much dead in the water anyway. So just February, March, April, May. Again, I'm concerned that that's not enough time. But
Grant?
I'm going to be direct. I reckon this is the worst kind of mealy mouthed pulling back from a decision I've ever seen, really, because you were trying to hide behind consultation and delay to really try and shield yourself from making a decision here today. We've talked about it multiple times, and this is just a political stunt, in my view, to hide yourself from making a decision. And that work there gives false hope to community committees that the status quo is going to prevail. And I don't think that's going to happen. And I want to be direct to say that now while I'm here, because that's what we're here for, to say the hard stuff. So I think we've come a long way. We should be direct. We should make the decision today, acknowledging what we've heard, but be open to the idea of saying, did we get it wrong? As I said, I'd prefer a 4A where it says, pause after the implementation of stage 1, review the effectiveness of what we've done. If we've made a mistake, let's put our hands up, admit it, and do something to remedy it. But I don't see this as, I'm happy to see it delayed through to the 1st of June, but giving hope or some sort of idea to community committees that this is going to change is wrong. And I think we should make the decision today.
Thanks, Grant. Is there anyone further who would like to speak on 2?
Yeah, I do. I disagree with Grant. My concern is, and what's been raised with me is the process that we're going through, and I agree with Sophie. The process going forward is important. As I said before, bringing our communities with us. And I think just cutting it off right now or at that date, which is essentially now because of the Christmas break, and I'm involved with one committee that two committees that only meet every 2 months anyway. So there's not much time in that regard. But I prefer that we have this staged approach. It is now out there. As Malcolm said, we can discuss it and actually have those conversations in the open. And I think we need to give our community some time for them to respond and be working forward from there.
Sorry to keep coming back to saying something again, but just reflecting on what Grant's mentioned and also Mark earlier about us delaying making a decision, or we're here to make hard decisions sometimes. Yes, we are, but we're also here to make sure that the decisions we make are right for our communities. And right now, I'm not sure that we're doing that. So if this is what we've got right now, I don't think that it's the right decision to support it. That's not me backing away from a difficult decision. It's because when it comes down to social well-being, it needs to be right.
I think if you look at the original recommendation too, this recommendation could be more direct. We are still going to carry on doing what we're going to do. We're just extending the time frame for these communities to get their incorporated society status from March the 15th to June.
It takes a lot longer than that.
The committees are not being established. They can still be commissioned.
So I think that two is up there doesn't presuppose any particular outcome other than this report has already said this is council's, thinking, and that allows engagement on a starting point. So there's a straw man that would be in the community, and that would be the starting point for some communication and some discussion around what might need to change around it. Maybe we've got it right. So then, as Grant said, we'll end up mid next year and we'll be in this space because it was the correct thing to do. But we'll know that it's the correct thing because of the time we've taken with our communities. It may also be that we end up somewhere quite different in the middle of next year because of the way that feedback has come to us. Does anyone else want to speak on too? All those in favour that we work with our current council committees as specified in Appendix 2 and Appendix 3 through to 1st of June next year on a change process to be implemented on 1st of July to ensure council can continue to meet our community expectations and legislative requirements, say aye. Aye. Against? Declare it carried. Would you like that recorded, Sophie? Okay, just all those in favour, just please raise your hands so I can record who is there. All except Sophie and Grant. And those against, raise your hands. Grant and Sophie. Yeah, thank you. That having passed, the rest of the recommendations can wait except for 8, which just allows a community to take a decision into their own hands about their own need for a future and to expedite, as Councillor Mugford has said, some of the changes that are going on within communities currently.
I'll move clause 8 if you like.
Okay, yeah. Thank you, Councillor Alexander. Seconder, Councillor Bland.
It's actually 9.
Oh, it's 9 on there now.
New number 9 we're talking about.
It was the original 8. Would anyone like to speak on that number 9? Although, sorry, yes, Councillor Hassan.
Just with regards to consider disestablishing the community structure, how's that envisaged if they are a township, a hall and a reserve committee all combined? Because really you've got one which is operational, which is your reserve and your hall, and then you've got your community committee, which is your advocacy or democracy. And we're looking at changing that. So I just want some clarity around how do we disestablish, because I use the example in Springston, we have an incorporated society. We also have a township, reserve and hall committee that is actually combined. They could decide through this mechanism, and they're not the only ones, that because they've got the incorporated society, they could change the rules of the incorporated society and actually transfer those 3 or one of those, the township, right, across to the incorporated society. So just trying to clarify how we're going to manage that, given the complexity of some of our committee structures, that we've actually taken them down this road, introduced the area of incorporated societies, and now we want to separate, it seems, the community committee side from the operational for the reserves and halls.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So that opportunity already exists, and what I'm looking at is actually an application from 2 committees that I received overnight, Glen Tunnel Community Committee and Glen Tunnel Community Centre. And the process that has always been available on these two committees are following is they simply need to notify myself and seek permission, which I then write a report to council, which talks about the responsibilities that have been delegated or assumed in some cases by those committees, how they will then be delivered going forward. So nothing is changing, it's simply reinstating what's already available.
I guess I'm really concerned that we're just throwing the staff a hand grenade as to what they're supposed to do with that that we've just given them, because you're going to get multiple different responses at each committee that they approach. It needs to be based on a framework, at least, that they go out and say, well, this is the framework we're working towards. How do you fit into this new model? Because without that, it's almost impossible for the staff to deliver any outcome of what's being put in front of them. And I think we should at least affirm that the framework they're working towards is what's in the report, because otherwise I think we're opening our staff up to a long and very difficult and it could be quite contentious issue. And you know, it will be passionate, it will be emotive. And, you know, the decision that's made here today has landed our staff in a difficult position. So I want to give some support to the staff in this process. If you're going to send them on this pathway, give them a framework to work with at least.
Thanks, Grant. I think the principles within the report is the current thinking of council and staff. That's why it's been brought to us, and so that would be what is the starting point for discussions with the community. The timing has obviously been pushed out, but the direction, I haven't heard anyone saying the direction around change has been the wrong thing to do. But where we finally land might look different because of that feedback. In the report, in its essence, gets down to not having more than one committee per township. And sometimes it might suggest that there not be a committee per township. And so that's another thing that I think needs discussion with our communities. And if that could be an agreed starting point or an addition that's clear, so that I agree grant staff can then actually know what their role is in the beginning of the year, then that would provide some clarity. Is that councillors' understanding of the direction we're going? Yeah, cool, thank you. Councillor Mugford.
Yeah, I just want to agree with Grant wholeheartedly that we need to set parameters as councillors and staff and everything, that we are working towards certain things, and I think they're the things that have to be discussed with committees, but it has to be on the same level with all of us.
Yeah, Sophie?
I just want to add to that whatever happens in that period of time, it would be great if there's something that actually enables the committees to talk together and share their own information, what goes right, what goes wrong, help them to talk, networking and sharing that kind of information is invaluable when you're doing work for free. And there are going to be lessons learned on all parties, but if it's just this 4-month period where we can make more decisions here around this table or within this building, that's not fair on them. If they're going to be given the opportunity to establish something else or reduce down to one committee per township, they need to know how that works for other people, what doesn't work. And if we can provide venues and timeframes for that, facilitators, that would be great.
Thank you. So working with David and staff, if there can be a process outlined and a comms plan at the February meeting, then we'll know exactly where we're going with this at the start of next year. That'll be reported back to this next council meeting. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Denise. Thank you for all the comments, as I've said, around the room, and for the guests that have joined us today. We'll adjourn the meeting now for a cup of tea or coffee, and guests are more than welcome to come and join us for that as well. Thank you. We'll begin the meeting again in 15 minutes. continue on. Item number 2 today is Halkett Pool report. Closure of the Halkett Pool community pool for 2020-2021, and welcome James and Tanese to the front room. James.
Kia ora, Mr. Mayor, councillors, public and staff. In front of you there is a report on the closure of Halkett Community Pool for the 2020-21 season. And the purpose of the report is to really go through the background of where we've been, to provide you with a response to the issues raised by the Halkett Committee on the 4th of November 2020, and also propose options for the future as well. I'm going to largely focus on the responses to the issues raised in the public forum by committee members on the 4th of November, but I will briefly touch on some of the background and some of the options going forward as well. You'll recall that on a council meeting on the 22nd of July, a report outlining the concerns with water quality was brought forward. This included inadequate chlorine readings. That was readings of 0 chlorine levels in the pool for 12 days in a row with no remedial actions recorded. And that was first noted by a council officer visiting the site. The testing was also not taking place at the scheduled times and to the requirements of New Zealand Standard 5826. Since then, correspondence has been given to the committee saying, letting them know that that report was going up to council, and then in the subsequent public forum presentation, they raised a number of concerns which I'll briefly touch on. The chlorine dispenser. So due to some previous issues around accessing site, and some disagreements about how the chlorine would be issued, there was some correspondence that's mentioned on top of page 40, where the offer was made from myself to go and start the controller for them if they wished. So the offer was put out there. The chlorine pump and some of the other items that needed to be done before the pool was started was done by council staff. That offer was declined, and no further communication was received as to any issues. In terms of financials, we as council have not received any income from the committee over the past 3 seasons. And it's noted that we have received bills totaling $2,300 from the committee. That's billed back to a committee member for contract for services as agreed with Halkett Community Centre. Our understanding of this is that is basically payment for looking after the grounds and testing the pool water. In terms of usage, we don't have a clear understanding of what the usage is. Calinchi Pool and Leaston Pool operate either very clear records of the number of keys sold and to who, and as well as things such as sign-in and out sheets as well. That's not operating at Halkett, so we're not 100% sure as to the accuracy of the keys that are issued or the usage of the pool. There was some concern raised around the way the ownership of the pool and how that was working. So that's been checked out, and in terms of the response that we've received internally, there was an internal loan set up in 1999, and then since the introduction of district-wide rates, the cost has been funded out of the district-wide targeted rate. There's no separate loan in relation to the Halkett Community Pool, and just because that's been transitioned from, or just because that targeted rate is there to support a new facility doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to be given back to the community at any stage. There's correspondence around the training as well, and you'll see some correspondence that's written down there. There's concerns raised around the lack of follow-up, and the committee wasn't aware of multiple spaces. You'll see, so I just go back a page on page 39, that the second paragraph from the bottom, there was commentary around, please let me know who you'd like to attend. We have multiple spaces. No response was received from that email on the 31st of October, and a further follow-up email went through to the committee on the 27th as to when the course was going. And one volunteer said that they were going, one committee member, sorry, said they were going to attend. In terms of ways forward, there are a number of ways that we can move forward. I believe that the committee has not presented any information that should change the decision that's being put forward and accepted by council, which is for the pool to remain closed for the 2020-2021 season, and that the future of the pool should be consulted on as part of the LTP. However, if we're looking down the road of future options, there are a number of ways we could look to run things. Probably the two preferred options, if that was to occur, was that essentially council staff should be in charge of operations of the pool rather than through a committee, and that a limited season would be put in place so that trained community volunteers could be put in place to run the pool and test the water, and this operation be ensured by council staff. We wouldn't necessarily issue keys for the pool. We'd have specific opening hours if that was the case. And another option for potential consideration is, divest the pool in the community centre, which could be part of the feedback gathered in the LTP as well. So that's largely it from me. I'm happy to take any questions or concerns or elaborate, dive any deeper into any of those points that were mentioned in the report.
Thank you, councillors. Any, yes, Councillor McInnes.
Sorry, it seems to be my day for speaking lots. Thank you very much for the report. I know you're aware that so I've only been to one Halkett meeting. They definitely have struggled to access information from council in one form or another. And I think that is pretty much what's led us to this particular report today. I'm not going to lay the blame wholly on them. I guess some of it is also here and also on myself. It's been a strange year, but I've not really had sufficient background information to communicate timely enough, I don't think, to help them to avoid this. So, for instance, parts of the report regarding the training, yes, there's a line in your email that says, please let me know who you'd like to attend. We have multiple spaces, but at the beginning of it, it says, we're requesting this is attended by a volunteer from each community pool. So my understanding from Penny is that she understood that that meant the multiple spaces were allocated one volunteer per pool. So when something else came up, they hadn't allocated anybody else to attend that training. And she had a matter at home as a volunteer that needed to take priority and didn't realise that, all along they could have nominated 2 or 3 other people to go. Regarding the ownership of the pool, definitely there is a misconception in the community there, and I don't know how that was communicated way back when it happened. But there again, sometimes it's in the choice of your words, isn't it? Regarding sign-in and everything, they're absolutely certain that they've never been asked to record how many people are attending at what time. I'm familiar with sign-in, sign-out books, but they're totally unaware that this was a requirement. And then I've also got there, yes, the chlorine dispenser. Penny is adamant that she was told to not touch it, and that was the instruction that she received. Now, I'm sure that there was more around that, but it just goes back to almost the previous discussion that sometimes something becomes bigger than a volunteer or a volunteer committee, unless you can be very, very clear about what parameters are needed, right down to teaching someone to effectively suck eggs by writing all the information down, because when you have that many different things on your plate, you'll take in some of the information, but you need to refer back to something else. The support is needed there, and I really feel for these guys because they absolutely value their community pool and they want it to be open and available to their children and just generally to their local community. I can't see that there's a way really to open it this year, but I just want to take this, I guess, more than anything else, as another lesson that if we're going to be doing anything around community committees and our volunteers, we've got to recognise that they have their own lives as well. There are health and safety responsibilities that are huge, and in the case of a pool, that's massive in terms of making sure the chlorine and everything else goes in there straight up. I do like the proposal that if it was going to open again next year, that it's manned, because there are quite a few ways where something can go wrong, especially if you do have other commitments upon your time. But overall, yeah, I think what's brought us here today is failure to communicate at both ends, including mine. Thanks.
Thanks, Sophie. Is there anyone else who'd like to discuss this? Otherwise, a mover and a seconder to receive this report. I think it comes back as part of the balance between our network of pools and provision to the community, and also a local desire to have a facility that has been enjoyed for generations continue to be used by those that are there. James, in your report, last paragraph of number 4 talks about divesting of the asset. I'd like to see that pretty clearly in the LTP as an option so that the community can understand that that's there. Otherwise, I agree with Councillor McInnes that having it manned is really the only safe way to be operating that pool from council perspective going forward. But if there's a way that it can be open for in 12 months' time for the community, and they've got a say over whether they want to create an incorporated society to make that happen, that'll be up to them. Mover, Councillor Lemon, seconded Councillor Epeha. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against, declare it carried. Thank you. Item number 3, Rollson Town Centre Roading and Reserve Consultation. Douglas. No, Joanne. Do I have a mover for the reports A, B, C and D? So there's a new D that's been suggested to me, Councillor Reid. And Douglas. We'll talk about it. Kia ora. Douglas, the D's up on the board. Great.
Good morning. Thank you for your time. So the first part of this report, I'll just perhaps hand over to Councillor Reid as the chairman of the hearing committee, just to talk about the hearing panel's process, and then we'll just go through the suggested change.
Thanks. Thanks, Douglas. Murray said I probably would prefer chairperson as chairman, but probably we'll leave those details. So we had a hearing on the 30th of November, and thanks for staff for organising that and for receiving the submissions. And joining me on the hearing panel was Shane, Sophie and Jenny. And so we had five submitters who came and talked to us, and thank you to them for taking the time out of their day. Unfortunately, with the limited time between now and when it's gone on the agenda, I haven't seen the report until it was on the agenda, and unfortunately, but with the looking at what is recorded from the hearings, and we've got got Appendix A and Appendix B. So just a question around the table, Appendix B. When we go back to the submitters, is it what we're going to come out of Appendix B is what will be going out? Just because that's more teased out than what I see in Appendix 1A.
Yeah, so the idea is that we just wanted to indicate what the staff, before we had the hearing, what the information we were going to, the scope of it was, and then just also indicate what was added in addition following discussions following the hearing.
Yeah. Now, so with the hearing, there's been no real fundamental changes that we've seen to the design or anything like that. What things did come up were a number of things with regards to the reserve, and a number of people have suggested things, and those obviously are still in process as to putting those in, but the actual town centre, the roading and that side of things, there hasn't been any change with regards to those. And a number of the submissions seem to be in support of the proposals, and there were concerns raised from some submitters about, the use of courtesy crossings and questioning appropriateness and potential accessibility issues. And the DHB went into quite a bit of detail about that, and even recommending a 10k per hour speed limit. But the advice that we received from a transport consultant was that the low speed environments have been designed into that environment, which we've taken on board. I've personally, since that hearing, I mean, myself going along Tennyson Street, biking along Tennyson Street to turn into Markham Way, I've had a ute come very close to me. So I can see from, you know, looking at designs that we've got now, we know how they are suitable and how they should be, the cars and everything should be act in those environments. But I think as a council, we should still be monitoring how it is going. And it is something that Shane has brought up that with me is that we and this goes back to the discussions we had earlier around the community committees. We do have quite distinct urban and rural, and there's different ways that you drive around in an urban area than what you'd expect in a rural area. So potentially more education maybe for our population out there. And I don't know whether Shane wants to go talk further later about that. And just with one submitter has concerns about the car park on the reserve, and that's hence I've asked for the actual quote out of the reserve exchange decision to be put in, and it just shows a bit more clarification that from what is written there, it's not just, it appears that what the commissioner was saying is that they don't want more car parking on the reserve than what is actually available for the reserve, as opposed to that you can't park on the reserve if you are going to the commercial development. And that's sort of just a little bit more of a clarification. And those are the main things that I've had, but thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Reid. Douglas, Mark.
Well, I had a question for the hearing panel. Looking at the hearing panel recommendations on page 54, that they agree that the Anzac commemoration could move to the town centre in the future. Is the hearing panel therefore recommending that either the clock tower or the memorial panels on the clock tower, which are the focus of the Rollson Anzac Parade, be shifted to a new monument in near or around the town centre? Because it would seem somewhat unusual to have an Anzac memorial not at the location where the Anzac Parade was being held. And I just want to clarify that in terms of costs associated with that. I see the submitter whose commented on the cost of the traffic management, but actually council's normally paid for that cost of that traffic management around the Anzac Parade. So I'm just trying to get clear in my mind what the outcome of that discussion was.
Thanks for raising that. I should have raised that as one of the points that came up. So glad to see that you're questioning that. There was a bit of discussion about that, and this has been a discussion that's been had before. Mark, you'll be aware that the Residents Association have discussed about moving the clock tower and been asked about that, and that itself, there is a want to leave it where it is and not move that. But going forward, I mean, the Anzac Day Parade has really outgrown the site that it is now. To the point, I mean, it has caused issue. There is traffic management plans in place, but it has caused issues of the number of people that are standing on the roadway. So there has been floated that maybe have it in the reserve going forward, and where there will be the room available. And Phil Miller has said that there is space available and has floated the potential of having some sort of memorial. And this will obviously it has to be something that looks at further. There is nothing that is actually concrete. It is, as a community, still a discussion to go forward. And the questions you raised about moving the panels from the clock tower, I mean, that's another question that could be raised and discussed as well.
Thank you.
Kia ora, tēnā koutou. Just from me, I just wanted to commend staff for all the efforts that you've put in, and what we've seen is a wonderful collaboration of community, runanga, tangata whenua and staff and council. I think it's a model that has merit, and we've talked about community committees this morning. I think this is a good example of council, staff, community and our iwi working together. And from the design plans that I've seen, I think it's going to be an amazing facility, and I can't wait to bring my kids through and experience all of the facility, and including the Runanga Wakahuia. I think it's going to be amazing. So really appreciative. Tēnā rā tātou katoa. Thank you.
Kia ora. Thanks all. Just following on from what Councillor Alexander was asking about our discussion around the Anzac Parade. So that sort of leads into just thanking the people who came to the hearing. So Lytton Volante, who we spoke to about the Anzac Parade, that kind of was a run-on accidental almost, because he's the Vice President of the Templeton RSA. So his concern was in terms of the viability and the safety of running Anzac parades, something that we want to promote and keep happening in a safe environment. So it wasn't technically part of the hearing, but the conversation sort of followed through and became part of that there. He did acknowledge that it's more of a town affair than actually organised by the RSA itself, but they do have involvement and obviously are motivated to keep that sort of thing that sort of event happening. I also want to highlight that we had a few of the other people who spoke at the hearing. Jason Hardy is a local resident, so we know that he's had ongoing concerns around how things happen, but it was great to actually see him and hear what he had to say. Also, we had the chair of Rollson Residents Association, Michelle, came. I believe she was actually more in a personal capacity, but still, it's really always really good to have people actually coming and speaking to their submission. And lastly, also there was Connor Buckley, which was really good because he's a young person at Rollston College. So great to see him wanting to get involved and have his say around something that's actually going to be more for his age group than many of us. So, yeah. Thank you to everybody involved.
Thank you. Thank you to the hearing panel who did the work on this. Some of the discussion obviously fell outside the scope of exactly what was needing to be decided, but good to have that communication from the community around things that concern them on the reserve, and that helps lead some direction for the group managing the Newtown Centre project as well. So there's 4 recommendations here. The D is in addition to what was circulated in your papers. Just clarity around that D doesn't just reduplicate the work that was just done through having a hearings panel and going through this process. Is it really about communicating the decision rather than engaging?
Well, it's aimed at the reserve side, and it's about those specific details, like one individual indicated some rugby goalposts left on the reserve could be a good thing. So those type of things we test with children, youth, adults. So it's not going to be consultation, it's just going to be engagement with various groups.
Great, thank you. Ipaha, any further discussion? All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Declare it carries. Thank you for that. Page 105 through 112, Water and Wastewater Operations Engineer Ahmed. This is Council receives the climate change policy and approves the climate change policy. Moved Councillor Alexander, seconded Mugford. Murray and Ahmed, are there a couple of highlights you'd like to draw to our attention?
I don't want to add too much other than we brought this to the briefing on 2nd of December. There was a general acceptance, I understood. A few questions raised and comments made. We changed the introduction based on your comments, Your Worship, around ensuring that it's indisputable that climate change. We also had discussions with Councillor Ipaha regarding the iwi engagement. So that there reflects our staff and Councillor Ipaha's views on that. I didn't note in the covering report that the day that we briefed you was the day that the government declared the climate change emergency. That's one step. And final point I'd make, this is just the first overarching policy. Strategies and action plans will follow. We have, as a staff and internally, we have to bring together our sustainability forum, our energy committee, our climate change people, and then consider how we resource this and project managers going forward. So that's all we have to say today. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Moved and seconded. All those in favour say aye. Against? Declare it carried. Thank you very much for bringing that to us. Next we have resolution to exclude the public, but just before we do, just thinking back on our public forum that haven't been dealt with in the first item unless there was anything else outstanding that Jen's brought to us, councillors would like reviewed. No? Okay. Resolution to exclude the public. Councillor Epeha, seconded McInnes. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Declare it carried. There being no new apologies or